I might introduce Pauline now. So very, very happy to introduce Pauline Clifford, our final speaker of the day, who works in the civil service in the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine. So Pauline has a wealth of experience in the service across 39 years, I believe. And she was very actively involved in writing the amendments and pushing for change and protection for disabled people that then became the Employment Equality Act. And she was also key in the development of the DLO or Disability Liaison Officer role in the civil service. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you here today, Pauline. She's going to speak to you about building resilience for future career steps and touch a bit on her own experience. So
Thanks, Bamba.
Hand over to you now.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, everybody. It's been a very interesting morning. It's been nice to hear from the perspective of people who are looking to get into work, what they find good or bad about their placements. As Bamba said, my name is Pauline and I work in the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. I'm here today to talk to you about resilience and next steps when a placement doesn't lead to a position. So you've done your placement, you've sat your interview and you don't get the job. This is an unfortunate reality of a placement. Sometimes there's not a good fit between you and the area in which you're placed. It's not a reflection on you, it's the reality of working within a large organisation. Not every post is suitable, which is not to say that you shouldn't try again. If you've not been placed where you were in the civil service, there are other departments or other areas of the department you were in that may suit your skills. So try to keep an open mind and be ready to try again. And as mentioned by previous speakers, one of the first things I encourage newly appointed staff to do, whether on placement or probation, is to keep a notebook or open a document. Write down the tasks you're given. Set out what you did, because this is about you. What were your obstacles? How did you meet them? Did you solve them? If not, why? If so, what did you do? What did you succeed at? Again, what you did, how you did it. It's a useful tool for your next application. So what's next when you don't get the offer you expected? Well, first, the practical things. Do acknowledge the disappointment. It simply means that it meant something to you. It's natural to feel disappointed. You can sit with it for a while, but don't unpack your suitcase and live there. It's temporary. Do ask for feedback. It's vital. From the board, from your colleagues, from your mentor. Take it on board. See what others think you can change to improve. Do also look at what you enjoyed about the job. What tasks you found easy, what you achieved. Do look at what you found difficult. Why was that? What can you do differently next time to change that? Identify issues that have impacted your ability to perform or complete tasks. For instance, was there a reasonable accommodation that may have helped you that you didn't request? Was there a training need that should be addressed? Identify any gaps in your knowledge or training that you can work on to resolve and look for opportunities to do so. Look at the things you did well. Look at your skills. See what areas fit those for your next role. List the things you worked on with examples. Write them down because you will need them again. What you learned from what you did, good and bad. This will help you with your next application. This is particularly important in the civil service because it's competency-based interviews and they look for examples. Also, what would you do differently knowing what you know now? Write these down. They may come up as an interview question next time. Reflect on what you learned about yourself and your abilities. Realize that no is not rejection, it's redirection. This may present you with another opportunity to do something better or different in the future using what you've learned from your placement. And register yourself on publicjobs.ie so that you're notified of future competitions and you don't miss opportunities. Many years ago in my late teens, I was that person. I was the one going into placements that didn't turn into a job. I was once placed in one of the local health boards at the time. I worked in a local health centre, which was in the Midlands. I did the job for over a year. And when the interview offer came up, I did it, but didn't get the position. And in fact, was asked to train in the person who did. I did feel a deep sense of failure at the time and wondered why me. I know it was a cause of concern for my parents, who had hoped that I would be working near home. But I had to set my disappointment aside and move quickly to apply for the civil service. The process from exam to interview took several months and was quite frustrating at times. I came to Dublin to do my interview and left feeling very uncertain about my success. Several months later, I got word that I was successful and a move to Dublin was on the cards. And so began what turned into a to date 39-year career in the service. Now, that's not to say that it was all plain sailing, because in the beginning it was not. I joined in the mid-80s, I am that old, and quickly realised that I was entering an organisation whose staff were largely ignorant of disability issues, not through any fault of their own. Some were not very welcoming, and some were very sceptical of the appointment of disabled people. There were special conditions attached to our employment. So when I went in, I had to serve an additional year of probation. And this was to allow the service to let us go if they needed to, because I was one of the first people with a disability in the service. So they weren't very sure what they were getting at all, and we weren't very sure where we were going either. Now, this extra year's probation allowed them, as I said, to let people go if they needed to. And it was used to remove some people that I knew of. So some of us joined the union and spoke to them about protection under the Employment Equality Act. At the time, it only covered gender equality. So they could not let me go because I was a woman, but they could let me go because I had a disability. From that conversation came a decision to look to amend the law on disability grounds, which eventually turned into the 9 grounds now covered in law. I was instrumental in writing the amendments and speaking publicly to push for change. There was a period of time in my life where I was in every newspaper in the country, which was quite funny sometimes. It took several years, but eventually it became the Employment Equality Act 2000, which was then again amended in 2005. Around this time, I got promoted and I changed departments. And I was naively, I was a lot less apprehensive about moving, as I thought that with a proven record of then 5 years in the service, I would not face any further issues. But sadly was disappointed when, on arrival in my new department, I was left waiting for the entire morning as my line manager refused to come and meet me. Eventually, after several phone calls, she arrived and announced loudly, "I told you I didn't want one of them," referring to my disability. This was in the early 90s, and thankfully things have now changed, as stemming directly from this incident, I sought to assist those of us already in employment and our managers and colleagues by drafting a code of practice for the employment of people with disabilities. Its purpose was to set out guidance for managers and those and others around workplace issues and solutions relating to disability. Following extensive research, the code was drafted and presented. This went through the employee-employer pathway and was adopted by the then Department of Finance and became part of our working conditions. Other organisations outside the service also took the code of practice on board and introduced similar in their organisations. To support the code of practice, I came up with the idea of a contact person in the organisation who would assist the person being employed and their manager with disability-related work issues. This idea went through the staff and official processes, and a post was created in each government department known as the Disability Liaison Officer. This person now assists new employees before and during the transition into work in the department. At the same time, a decision was taken to put in place another post known as an Access Officer, who assists members of the public in dealing with government departments. This has now also been taken up by organisations outside the service. For instance, if you ring the Aviva and you have a disability, there's an Access Officer who will deal with you. The same in most major cinemas or theatres. So, you know, it is working. Around the same time as this, I looked for and bought my first home. And then the recession hit, lucky me, and I found myself taking in lodgers to stay afloat. Some of these have become lifelong friends, and because of this, I got to travel to parts of the world I would otherwise never have ventured to. So, as you can see from this, all my no's became a redirection that changed my life and presented me with opportunities I would never have had and led me to do things I would never have thought of doing. So don't see failure as failure. Don't see no as failure. See it as the opportunity to look again at what you really want to do. Not forgetting while you're searching for work that it should not be all about the search. Focus on you. Remember the things you enjoy. Take time out of every day to do something not connected to work or the search for it. Learn a hobby, read a book that you've been putting off, meet friends, go for coffee, learn a relaxation technique, upskill. Learning something new can set you up to acquire new skills and gain confidence. Push yourself past your limits in small ways. Do at least one thing that you're scared to do. Sometimes the thoughts of doing something is more difficult than the task itself. Spend time outside in nature. Go to the cinema. The time you spend on yourself is important. Don't get so busy looking for work, you forget to live your life. It's important to remember that in life, there are many chapters to be written in all of our books. Failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of the journey. Everybody faces setbacks, but resilience is what sets successful people apart. Use any failure as fuel. Above all, believe in yourself and your abilities. Do things with the mindset of, because I know I can. Now, just on the subject of civil service interviews, you'll have heard Philip and others mention competency-based interviews. Now, I've just recently come off an interview board, and some of the things that have come up as a person on the interview board are things like dates. Very, very, very important. Do not forget to put the dates in. I recently came off an interview board and we had a candidate who did their CV. It all looked really well, but what they didn't notice was they had the same dates down for 2 different jobs. Now, that doesn't mean they didn't do them. It just means they didn't proofread their application. And in the civil service, you're more likely to be faced with competency-based interviews. And competency-based interviews are looking for a broad outline of your abilities in certain areas. So, for instance, they will ask you, tell me about a time when you had to build good rapport with a team. Have an example. You'll be asked to fill one in on your form when you're submitting it, but have a backup, because you don't want to be in a situation where the interview board looks at your example and goes, now I see you did X, Y, and Z. Give me another example where you did that. And remember, if you don't have the work experience, you can use your membership of a sport club, reading club, anything. You can use any example. Just make it fit. The application for the civil service is very specific. It will have keywords in it in the qualities they're looking for relating to that actual example. Make sure you fit those into your example. And I'm not saying to learn it off, but be familiar enough with your examples to speak about them. And remember, in an interview, their next question comes from your answer. So don't tell them something you are not comfortable speaking about. It can be fatal. And they will ask you strange questions like, tell me what somebody else would say is your best quality. Tell me what somebody else would say is your worst quality. And ask them then from that, what are they doing about their worst quality? So, there are a lot of things you can do to prepare for your next time. And just because you got no this time doesn't mean we won't see you in the future. So just remember, document everything you do, document how you did it, and be prepared for a question of, tell me about a time when something went wrong, when you failed, and how did you deal with it? Because you learn more from failure than you ever do from success. Thank you. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you so much, Pauline. That was really inspiring. I think the lived experience today from yourself and Philip has been really fantastic and such a pleasure to listen to. We have a couple of comments in the chat as well. Really nice comments thanking you for your advocacy work, and from Deirdre as well, speaking about the history and the journey, and how closely, I suppose, HEAD works with the civil service DLOs, and seeing that whole journey as a whole. And as well, another comment about feeling inspired and put at ease with overcoming barriers and failures. So I think it's made a huge impact today. It's really amazing to get some insights into how things have been for people with disabilities in the workplace over the years, and I suppose how far we've come. And how you turned a very negative experience with the previous manager into doing so much more, so much work for other people with disabilities and advocating for others, and your perspective on failure as well. So thank you so much for sharing that. If there are any questions, please feel free to pop in. You can pop them in the chat, or if you want to come off mute, feel free to do so.
One thing I would mention, Bamba, is when you're in the service, there are a lot of social organisations like book clubs, and we have a social club in here. If you're in on placement, join them. That's how you get to meet people. And ask, before you do your placement interview, at the end of your placement, ask for a practice interview. Find somebody like myself who knows somebody who's been on an interview board to arrange a practice interview, because they're more than willing to help. They're not we want to encourage people to come into the organisation, and that goes across the civil service. So don't be afraid when you are in on placement to ask for your peers to tell you who would do an interview with you, or join the social club and find out what's going on, because that's the other thing the interview board will look for, how you make an effort to fit into the organisation.
Absolutely. No, that's a really, really good point. We have one question in there. So with regards to civil service and the employment of people with disabilities, what are your hopes for the future?
Well, my hope is that they increase the number of people in the service, and that the work with blended working, it's become easier for some people who have issues around being in the office to work, because they're not required to be in the office full time now. My hope is that eventually we won't need the quota, in inverted commas, to get people into the civil service. Now, when I started, it was only 3%. It's now officially at 4.5%, but some departments are already exceeding it, including my own, which is up around the 5%, maybe 5.5%. Now, I know that doesn't sound like an awful lot, but from a starting point that 39 years ago was 0, I think,
Wonderful progress.
Things are improving, and sometimes the only way you can change things is from inside. Like the changes that we were instrumental in bringing about couldn't have happened if we weren't here, because you don't know what needs to change sometimes until you come into an organization. And the people in the organization, with the best will in the world, they had no experience of dealing with people with disabilities. And because Ireland didn't go through a world war and able-bodied people didn't come back disabled, they didn't have to change society radically overnight the way France or England did, and the legislation didn't change. So in Ireland, there was always this concept of we were born with a disability, so we were ill. And that mentality was what needed changing. And that only changed when people like myself and others came into the service and went, well, no, you're not putting me sitting reading a book because I'm here to fill a quota. I'm here to work. I'm here to do a job. And yeah, we were seen as awkward and annoying and stubborn at the beginning, but sometimes you need to push the door and other times you need to kick it open.
Absolutely. I think that shows as well how resilient you were. And I suppose on that, how did you stay so strong and resilient, in the civil service during that journey?
There were days when I kind of went, what the hell am I doing? I'm human like the rest of you. But I think I was born with a stubborn streak a mile wide that said, no, you are not going to treat me differently because you don't know me. I am going to do what I am here to do, and you are either going to come with me or I'm going to pull against you. I think I'm just that type of a person with regards to disability rights. Personally, I'm actually a very quiet person. I'm actually painfully shy, and doing something like this used to be something I would absolutely dread. But I think because I saw what needed doing and I didn't want someone else, and I'm going to sound like I'm being very altruistic here, but I'm not. This is genuine. Because I didn't want anybody else to go through what I went through, I went, this needs to change, and how do we change it? And I won't say that I was alone. I wasn't. There was a group of us who did this, and it took an awful lot of hard work and an awful lot of goodwill from some people in the service who kind of didn't understand why it was a problem,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you seem so comfortable and confident in speaking to it all. So it's really wonderful to hear your story. Um, we've a couple more questions coming in, so if you're happy enough to answer one or two more. So
yeah,
I
sure.
know you obviously kind of spoke to I suppose how your experience has been in your journey, but we have a question just around, in your experience, how do employers treat people with hidden disabilities?
Well, the thing about having a hidden disability is when you come into the service in particular, and I can only speak to the service, you can disclose to the disability liaison officer that you have a hidden disability. And from experience as a manager, I would encourage you to let your direct line manager know. You don't have to tell the whole world, but if something that you are living with is going to have an impact on your functionality or your ability to do something, or if something could cause you difficulty because they don't know that they need to accommodate it, disclose it. It's held in confidence. The person that you tell has to deal with it in confidence. Don't be afraid to disclose a hidden disability, because sometimes you're just making life harder for yourself by not doing, because you don't want to be put into an area where you might be in danger. If you have something like epilepsy, you don't want to end up down in Dublin Port, which is part of our department, because there may be areas there that are unsafe for you to work in. So if you're open and honest about what your needs are and your reasonable accommodations are there for that reason, disclose it. It will be held in confidence.
Yeah.
Like I myself have cerebral palsy, and in the beginning of my career, I walked completely unaided with no need for crutches or walking stick. But then 10 years ago, I had an accident and I destroyed the leg that I walked on. So now I'm on crutches full time. So that does now restrict me in a way I wasn't restricted. And I had to be quite frank fairly recently with the disability liaison officer of, no, that area is not going to suit me because of this. And it was dealt with. And no, there are no repercussions. Remember, the reasonable accommodations are there to protect you from that. And they can only be put in place for your protection if you are honest. And I know that can be very scary, because I remember my first day coming into the civil service going, oh my God, how are people going to react? Because I grew up in a house where there was 2 of us with disabilities and 2 without. And my parents never treated me any different. I went to kind of general education. I didn't go away to a special school. My brother did, I didn't. So I was never treated any differently to anyone else. I was just told, get on with it. And you either got on with it and failed, or got on with it and succeeded. But that meant I was kind of very naive when I came into my job that people would treat me fairly. And in the beginning, they didn't. And I kind of went, no, I'm not having this. But then I realized there are other people out there who aren't as mouthy as me, wouldn't speak up,
I think
So
that's probably where you got your determination from, though, as well, and that's
yeah,
what
yeah.
led to the changes.
Mm.
I think as well the point around disclosure, I just popped into the chat there a head's disclosure guide. It is obviously a huge part of being a
Mm.
person with a disability in the workplace. And the guide kind of walks you through the legislation, so your rights, I suppose, in the workplace, reasonable accommodations, kind of an action plan around disclosure. So that might be useful
And
for grads going forward in terms
disclosing
of if
it
they
to
want to
your
kind of,
line manager also means they're less fearful about how to deal with
yeah,
you.
yeah,
Because if they're not sure, if they know you're coming in under WAM and they know you have a disability, but they don't know what it is, that can make them apprehensive. And if they're apprehensive, they can't be as open with you as they want to be. And remember, they're not allowed to ask you. It's up to you to tell them.
yeah.
They,
Yeah,
you,
it is a difficult decision, but they can't help you, and I
yes.
suppose unless they know, So
And
it's
what you don't want is when you've done your placement and they're making recommendations for you to do your interview and you failed at some task. You don't want the reason you failed at that task to be, I didn't disclose my disability, so I didn't get the help I needed. Otherwise, I would have succeeded. You don't want it to impinge on your ability to get a job and keep a job. So it's best to be as open as you can. Now, you get to choose what you tell them. But to me, it's vital that you are honest with the disability liaison officer and your line manager, because it can impact what they can give you to do. And there is a rule that if you can do the main functions of a post, then you must be given that post. But if there are areas of the post that you can't physically or otherwise do, they can be reallocated to another staff member. But for your manager to do that, they need to know. You don't want a situation where they assign you a task and you're not completing it because of something you can't do. And they're waiting. Remember, everything in the civil service goes up the line. So somebody is waiting on you to complete your task for your end result. And what you don't want is your manager being asked, is X, Y, or Z done? And they go back to you. And because of your difficulty, you haven't said anything. And the task isn't done, because then they have to get someone else to do it. And you look like you didn't bother. And you don't want that. So it's always best to be very frank about what you can and can't do, in my experience. Now, that's with 39 years experience. I used to dread having to say, sorry, I can't do that. Now I don't care. It's a case of, nope, sorry, not me.
Yeah, no, I
You
think
know,
that's really important to say to people, especially kind of, I suppose a lot of people here today are probably at the start of their careers or, maybe a
yeah.
couple of years into it. And I think you kind of have to come to the stage where like that, you just, you know,
Mm.
you know that you need X, Y, and Z, and you know you need to ask for it. And I suppose you'd hope that there's only positives that will come from that and that'll support you in your role. And so I
And the
think that's
other
a really
thing to
important point.
say is just because the assistance isn't there now doesn't mean they can't get it. You
Yeah.
know, I just to give you an example, I have a friend who very recently got appointed to a role above mine, and he's visually impaired. Now, they've never had somebody at his level with a visual impairment. So they're kind of a bit all at sea as to, oh, how do we get him to do this, this, and this? So a very frank conversation had to be had about the equipment he would need to support him. And there is no issue with it. But he was actually afraid to ask. I had to remind him that he's entitled to ask for it. So, you know, the more you disclose, of course, it's up to yourself, but the more you disclose, the more assistance you can get. And the more accommodation can be made. Like a role can be changed. The civil service is like that in that there are similarities between roles, but depending on the area you're put in, you need different skills in different areas. So you could be somewhere like my previous area where you were dealing with the public, as in you were dealing with the staff members for accommodation and meeting rooms and all that kind of thing. And now I'm dealing with outside organizations, and I'm spending my time typing minutes, you know. So it just depends on where you're put. So the more you disclose, the more they can suit the role to you.
Yeah, it's a great point. Thank you, Pauline. We have one more question there if we have, I think we have the time there. So just any advice for building, I suppose, the kind of confidence that you have or that you've developed over the years?
Believe in yourself. Don't listen to the little voice in your head that goes, I can't do this. There's no such word as can't. Try. It doesn't matter how many times you fail, it's the time you succeed that matters. And as I said, I was painfully shy. I could not have done this several years ago. I hate, still to this day, hate being the last person into a room because I don't like people looking at me. And it's something you learn to do. Like, you know, you build your confidence by doing things. As I said in my presentation, do something that you don't feel comfortable with. It doesn't have to be something big. Do something small every day or every week that you kind of go, oh, I couldn't do that. And just because you've never tried it before, give it a go. You know, I mean, you might take up art as a hobby and it might turn into a career. You don't know. But that takes just, I don't care if I fail. You know, that's the mindset you have to go into these things with. I don't care if I fail, I'm going to try anyway. Because you might learn something that lets you do something else better than you thought you were going to be. And you might find something you love doing, you know, and that kind of confidence only comes with experience. It takes time. Give yourself time.
That's great. I think it's a great motto. Um, Thank you very much, Pauline. I think that is it for questions then. I think we're coming up on time as well. I just want to say a huge thank you to Pauline and how inspiring that was today. And you can, I suppose, see that from all the comments in the chat as well. So really, really delighted to have had you with us today.